Sing for Science is made possible in part by a grant from the Simons Foundation. Today's episode was recorded live with our guests in Brooklyn, New York, and with me hosting remotely from upstate New York. Don't forget to check out our other episodes with guests like Earth Eater and Mac DeMarco, so please subscribe to Sing for Science on your podcast platform of choice.
Nostalgia allows you to relive the past in your brain. So, something that happened to you when you were 17, when you think about it, it's not just in the past anymore. It's coming back into your present because you're thinking about it in that moment. And that has an effect on you psychologically and neurally in your brain too. Mm-hmm. And that's how you can study it. You can study it because it expresses itself in the present, even though it's about the past.
Welcome to Sing for Science, the show where musicians and scientists talk about music and science. I'm your host, Matt White. Each week we'll talk about a song by our guest artist and how it connects with our guest scientist's area of expertise. Today we'll be speaking with Shawn Marshall, best known as the artist Cat Power. Shawn's voice is one of the most hauntingly beautiful of her generations, and the timeless sound of her 10-plus albums spans folk, soul, and beyond. Cat Power's latest project pays homage to Bob Dylan's historic 1966 Royal Albert Hall concert album. Song for song, Shawn recreated Dylan's performance in its entirety last year at the Royal Albert Hall and has released it as a live album entitled Cat Power Sings Dylan. Also joining us is Cornell University neuroscientist and nostalgia expert Hetvi Doshi. Hetvi works at Cornell's Affect and Cognition Lab, where she researches the mechanisms, effects, and neural correlates of the emotion we call nostalgia. Working in a lab context, Hetvi studies how emotions interact with sensory input like smells, food, and music to produce the feeling of nostalgia. A growing body of scientific evidence has emerged that suggests nostalgia has the capacity to improve not just our health, but also social cohesion with one another. The title of this week's episode on the podcast is Cat Power Sings Dylan, the neuroscience behind our emotional connection to the past. Hello, Shawn and Hetvi. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Hello.
So I guess the best place to start, Shawn, I just read your interview in Vogue where you paint a very vivid picture of your relationship, not just to Bob Dylan, but to the Royal Albert Hall itself. I mean, at least through your eyes as a 23-year-old in the 90s. So could I trouble you to regale our listeners with the telling of that experience?
The regalia? Yeah, so first time I was in London, I was 23, and I stayed at this hotel called the Columbia Hotel. And it's on Hyde Park. Coincidentally, just before the pandemic, I was able to open up a summer concert series. I opened up for Neil Young and Bob Dylan in that same park, years later. But anyway, when I was 23, I walked through the park, had no idea where I was going. And I came through the park to the other side of the park, and I decided to take a right. And I walked and walked and walked. And I saw the building, the structure. I saw the words on the side of the building, Royal Albert Hall. I basically loved Dylan since I was very young. But when I saw Don't Look Back, I was either 19 or 20, the documentary Don't Look Back,
sure,
about Dylan during that tour in London. And I just sort of was just pretending, smoking my cigarette and just kind of pretending in my mind that no one was there. But I was just leaning up against the building, pretending that it was 1966 and that Bob was going to open the door and that I was going to say, hey, man, can I watch the sound check? And then in my mind, I went in with him. And I went in and became his girlfriend or something in my mind. So I did that for a few years whenever I'd visit London and stay at that hotel, the Columbia House.
Can I ask what you were feeling when you were there, in your body?
In my body, I was feeling connected to him. I was feeling because I think I moved around a lot as a kid. I loved the nature, and my imagination was I could like very easily pretend.
Yeah.
And I pretended all kinds of things. But I think that when I felt like I was connected to him just because I was imagining it.
Oh, the only reason I asked that is because nostalgia is also like, you can feel it like coming up in you, sometimes when you were like, I can so see myself standing in that place with him, even though I've never probably met him.
I hadn't met him at that point. Absolutely not.
And imagination is a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you know Bob. Yeah, Sean?
I met him in 2007 backstage in Paris. And then after I announced that I was doing this show, he announced that he was playing the same cities. And I was lucky enough to coincidentally be staying at the same hotel, and I got to say hello, and he got to say, "It's good to see you." And I got to see him play the next night on Halloween of last year. And it was the best I'd ever seen him sing.
Are there certain Dylan songs that you can listen to and sort of be transported to that time you first heard them, or to a period of your life when you were listening to them a lot?
Yeah, definitely. There was this record I got, I think I was 17, and I'd never seen it before. It was called Another Side of Bob Dylan. Just by the way the cover looked, I thought, oh, maybe it'll be like real simple, like Billie Holiday. Maybe there won't be a lot of instrumentation. And so I played the to Ramona. And as a young girl, we grew up, with a lot of social construct that doesn't speak for us in film, in school, in religion, in home, in the neighborhood and stuff, at work. There's a lot of places where we don't have anyone that speaks up for us or that speaks to us as acceptance, or whatever words I'm trying to say. But anyway, so I heard this song at 17, and I still, when I hear it, I feel so thankful that I heard it at such a young age, because I never have heard a man sing so eloquently, like protectively about a woman before.
And when you hear that now, are you feeling that same greenness or vulnerability as a 17-year-old?
Yes. Being able to not feel any tension in those arenas I was mentioning, being able to not feel that tension and that anxiety and that responsibility and that overthinking and that self-protection, that guardedness. Hearing a song like that is being able to relax in that way and feel like, don't worry about it. Yes, I definitely feel like, I can relax when I listen to that to this day. And I really think women, young girls, should listen to that. But women, that identify as women, should listen to that, because I'm just grateful to him for putting that down in a song for us, or for whoever he was writing it to.
And it might even have had a bigger impact on you because you were so young then. The things that happen to you developmentally really stay with you even as you're growing up and become a full adult with children yourself. And so the fact that it's able to have that same effect on you that it had when it was 17, it also means it came to you at that time in life when you're just learning so much, and it's all imprinting on yourself.
Yeah.
And then it stays with you.
Did you have that too when you were young?
I was actually talking about this with a friend today, where I remember the first time I heard Taylor Swift's Love Story. I was in grade 4. And I can imagine it in my head where I was. And the fact that I'm able to recreate it with so much detail, just really goes to say how much effect it had on me.
Do you still feel the same way right now when you hear that song?
Yeah, and it's not yes, I like her music, but that song for me, it's more about that emotion, that memory, that feeling in that time. That
she taught you something.
Yeah, or it just I was having such a good time with my friends and we were just walking, and it just is a sign of a good time. And for you, it sounds like it was a sign of a time you could relax and just ignore everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hetvi, if any of the things that I've asked of Sean and what she's talked about in terms of her experience thinking about Bob Dylan, being at Royal Albert Hall, hearing that song when she was 17, I don't know if any of those questions would pass muster in your lab, but if they did or come close, how would you interpret them?
I'm not gonna therapize, so I'm not gonna break down the experience, but there's like so many different characteristics of your experience that are so reflective of nostalgia and its emotion. So like the one thing that I think is really cool is you recreating the album. So like there's this technical term and it's called restorative nostalgia, which is when you try to recreate the thing that you're nostalgizing for.
Oh, that's like
and it's like going back home.
Tarantino.
Yeah, it's like when you miss home, you go back home. That's like restorative nostalgia. And in you restoring his album, you not only like brought something old back to life, but you also like became a part of the collective memory around Bob Dylan. And nostalgia is so much about you as a person, but also how you as a person fit with other people. So your individual memory of Bob Dylan, but also how everyone else feels about him. Like I'm sure you did this because you also recognize his impact on people all around the world. And you were like, you know what? I'm not the only one who feels this way. Let me share it.
And he's alive. And I wanted to do it because he's on earth. He's walking around doing what he does. And, a lot of things come out after someone's gone. And I really wanted to do it while he's here.
Yeah. And it's also like a way of expressing your own love. Like, it's also on some level deeply personal, I'm assuming for you, that it's showing this person that, oh, you had such a big impact on me. This is how I'm going to show my love to you, that I'm going to like recreate your album. People express love in a very different way, right? So like one of the things that I study is food nostalgia. And especially after moving away from home, I miss home food, right? And so one of the ways
and you
in
can't
which
cook, can you?
so I mean, what, I love cooking. It just takes me forever because I like experimenting and I like exploring, and the kitchen is a mess, and I'm like, God, I can't do this.
A messy kitchen is a good food.
But the way I think I show my love for my mom now that I'm away from her is by trying to make her dishes. It's like, this is how I stay connected with you, even though I am no longer with you. And that is such a big part of nostalgia.
I love that. I do the same thing with my grandmother. When she passed, I was trying to, do the biscuits. There's no way. I can't do it the way she does it.
And yet you try. Because that's how you stay connected to that person.
There was so much love in that food.
Yeah, like when someone makes food for you when you're growing up, it is definitely a sign of like security. Like, you know what? I trust you to give me food that's safe for my body. And that creates a connection to that person.
True.
And, we don't think about food and emotions always in the positive light in media, especially, you talk about like emotional eating and don't eat when you're sad and stuff. Yes. But it makes sense for us to have emotions about food.
That's so
we
true.
Eat 3 times a day.
Yeah, or more.
And we eat with people we love. Yeah. You usually don't like sit down to eat with someone you hate.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Where I'm from in the South, soul food, you can go in any restaurant and get like the classic soul food, which is delicious, and it's real specific, so there's so much love in there.
Well, so you're talking about this idea of displacement, which comes up in the research I've read. So can that apply to both place and time? I mean, here we are in New York. Sean, you're from the South. Hetvi, you're here in the States from India, and we're talking about this really hallowed ground time period with mid-60s, early Bob Dylan. Like, it seems displacement, can that apply to both time and place? And what's the difference there? How do you look at those as a researcher?
There's this person, Svetlana Boyam, and she wrote this book called The Future of Nostalgia. And she's a really good scholar. She is not on the experimental side of things. She was more in anthropology and understanding ethnographic studies and so on, so understanding people. And she said this one line where she was like, nostalgia exists in a long-distance relationship. And I think that line really captures so much, that the way it's defined even in modern times and was defined previous is that it's a longing for the past. It's bittersweet. It's not all positive. It's after something has usually passed. It's a sense of irretrievable loss. Like, there's something that's been lost that you can probably never get back. It comes from longing. It's such a weird emotion that, you can feel happy and sad for lots of random things. And probably you and I can feel happy about the same thing or sad about the same thing. But what I'm nostalgic for, you're probably not nostalgic for it at all.
Really?
And that's because it's from our life history. Like, your grandmom's biscuits, you must love them. But for me, it's like my mom's lentils and rice, like it's such a different trigger for both of us. But the way we feel is so similar to each other. And so that's like nostalgia is such a big memory part. But when does memory come into play? When it's in the past.
When does memory come into play?
Like when it's in the past, like, it becomes a memory when it's like no longer with you, and then it's like the way you relive that is because you think about it again. You have that memory again.
Do you know about EDMR or?
Oh, EMDR. Yes.
EMDR.
The therapy method.
Yeah. Does that has something to do with nostalgia, right?
Interesting. So I don't know if I can speak scientifically to EMDR, though I do have personal experience with it. But I've actually never put them together in the same bucket. So maybe it's something I can think about. But I get your point about EMDR. It is also about memories. But one thing that I was, that Matt asked is that, like, how do you study something so ephemeral, like something you can't even like place your fingers on? So there's this very interesting thing about the brain, okay? And it's something I think as scientists we kind of make fun of sometimes. The one thing to know is that at all times, you're using every part of your brain. It's not like right now in this moment, I'm only using 10% of my brain. I'm always using every single part of it. Yeah?
Question.
Yes.
What happens when I don't even know what this is called, but when you're using your brain and you can sense that you and the other person are thinking together at the same time. You're talking and we're both understanding what each other is saying, but you sense that you guys are also thinking without words on a different level.
Okay, so that's a little tangential, but I do have a slight answer for that, is that there are some studies on brain synchrony.
Yeah.
And like how brain waves can sometimes sync up when people are having conversations.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that I know, but there's also a lot that I don't know. And this is one of those things that I don't know much about. But I would think that reasonably it might be happening because you and I are probably talking about the same concept, or you and I are engaged in the same kind of task, which is talking. Because even though your brain is active as a whole, there are like certain parts of the brain that support certain processes. And so if you and I are doing the same kind of task, which requires the same process, we might have similar activity to each other during that time, which is also how you can study brains. And so to go back to the question of like what lights up in the brain, I put it in quotes only because it's not that simple, but for now we'll stick to that. There's not been that much research on nostalgia and the brain, in all honesty, but the little bit that has been there, they show that, systems that are with your memory, so your hippocampus, which is like really known for time travel, that you going back to you being 17, reward systems. So like, the ventral striatum, the ventral tegmental area, substantia nigra, like all these dopamine systems.
Reward systems. So what are some other examples of rewards?
Oh yeah, food, sex, drugs. Like really primary rewards that would cause
laughter.
A dopamine cycle. Yeah, laughter.
I don't do drugs. I don't have sex.
You eat food. Drink. You do music.
I do eat a little bit.
When you perform, when you perform,
I would have sex.
But there's such a thing as laughter meditation.
Sign me up. Oh, it's the Comedy Store in Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles.
Okay, so reward systems.
Yes, it activates rewards because, it can be rewarding to eat something that your mom used to make, or it can be rewarding to listen to Dylan's music. But the interesting thing that actually I'm studying, which hasn't really been studied before, is how nostalgia is almost felt in the body. A lot of research has been done on memories, but nostalgia also involves other processes in the brain that are not just about memory. And like a really good example that is food again. Like, when you eat something you love, it's not just your metabolic system, it's also your emotional brain, your cognitive brain that are interacting with each other. And so some of the new areas that we're interested in studying, there are regions of interest, are the hypothalamus. We usually think of the hypothalamus as like, oh, okay, it makes me hungry, it doesn't make me hungry. But the hypothalamus receives input and feedback from memory systems and social systems in the brain. And so your metabolic system, your food is influenced by how you feel for it.
That
by the
might have
people you're
something to
having
do
it.
with smoking and drinking alcohol being some sort of addiction. I wonder if that's there because you need something to. I wasn't breastfed, so I wonder if people who were addicts, if they weren't breastfed. I'm not an addict though. I just have a ton of stress.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if that is related to the
There's
hippopotamus.
sometimes nostalgia works in a way where if you're threatened, like let's say your social identity is threatened or you're feeling away from home, so you're feeling lonely, that is also a threat to the system, that you're feeling lonely. You might crave foods that sustain that social connection without there being an actual person with you. And that's one thing that nostalgia can do, right? Like if I feel like I'm away from my home, how do I feel closer to my home? By eating the food.
Filling up the pain.
Exactly. And so, yeah, there's like two mechanisms. I think what you're also talking about is comfort foods, like when you just want to feel full. That can also be a different but overlapping mechanism with nostalgia. It's actually kind of interesting. One of the first studies I did, we tried to show that comfort foods are different from nostalgic foods.
It's making me cry.
We tried to show that comfort foods are a lot more about how they taste and how they make you feel, or like what the weather is outside. Like, if it's raining, you want a bowl of soup or something.
Yeah.
But nostalgic foods are about childhood, about development, about the experiences you had when you were young. Yes. Social security. Yes. There's actually this really interesting study where they tried to use nostalgia to get people to stop smoking. They tried to tell them like, okay, think about how you used to be before smoking. Do you miss that self? And they tried to use that framework to get people to slowly wean smoking.
Did it work?
I mean, it is only one study. I don't know if there's been more studies on
Yeah,
it.
they only had one cigarette.
So I can't
They were like,
Only
sorry.
one cigarette and one guy. Wasn't an exhaustive study.
Sorry.
Well, let me ask you this.
We should not have spoken about smoking.
Dennis Johnson, the author, he said that a pack of cigarettes is like a pack of 20 friends, that you're never alone. And I think that has something to do with that feeling what you're talking about.
The coping part, the coping mechanism part. Yeah, it might.
What's the word we're studying today?
Capital N, nostalgia.
Capital N.
Let me ask you this.
No.
Hetvi, because the way that you and I got connected was through your study of consciousness.
Wow.
How does nostalgia connect to that, which is a very rich field for study and opinion, obviously?
Yeah, we got connected through my interest in consciousness because the person who had been on your podcast before, Shimon, he's on my committee that I work with. And the reason why nostalgia and consciousness connect, and I think any research well done can connect to consciousness, is because of this really fancy word, which I'm going to throw out there. It's called qualia. But all it means is just the subjective experience of being. Like
Observing yourself.
of just being, like like any like moment of awareness or vision or taste or smell, or like just that experience of it. And the reason why I love nostalgia and I study it is because I think it is such an interesting experience. Like I'm very interested in how people live nostalgia. So like if I was to put a trigger in front of you, like if I was to play a Dylan song right now, what would happen to you? Like, that phenomena of you reliving it.
Yeah, it's like a dimension. It's a destination.
And like, what's really interesting is how it combines so many different things. It combines your senses because it's auditory, It combines your memory and your like self-identity because it's a part of who you are.
And physically, if you get the goosebumps.
And it's embodied, exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's something you can also
Vibrational.
feel in your body. And so I think I've always viewed nostalgia as a really cool topic of interest because it has all this really interesting intersection with topics all I'm interested in. And so for me, it also offers me a window to study all of these in a realm that is so personal to the individual, but also very common across how we all feel it.
But one of the things I wanted to say, which involves consciousness, which involves nostalgia, is that when I am doing press for this Bob Dylan Live at Royal Albert Hall from 1966 recording with different journalists, one of the things that I've noticed that I've been saying is that because of the sort of spell that a song can provide someone, just some call it Holy Spirit, some call it, I don't know, but there's something that connects us all. That line, that thread, that human thread, and that consciousness is available to us all day long around the world. But do we have a way to connect in? I think through music is the easiest way. But so that's why I did this record.
That makes sense.
Because I believe that people around the world, people that are old as my parents, from their 80s to my age, would love to hear it. And I think they have kids and grandkids now. So we need that consciousness, for our planet, for our rights, our women's rights. We still don't have equal rights in this country, and I believe that consciousness, that nostalgia and that consciousness, that's why I put out this record.
And I think, so you and I have very similar motivations in this one way, where I've started something, it's called the Community Nostalgia Initiative. And it's a little bit like what you are talking about, where I wanted to create a space where people could share their experiences of food nostalgia. And we're asking people, submit an art piece that captures your experience of nostalgia. It can be anything. A sculpture, a painting, a sketch.
Who are you asking?
Everyone on campus. It can be faculty, staff, and outsiders are more than welcome.
Cool.
But the whole goal of that was to be like, we all feel this, but in such different ways. Let's come together, exhibit those ways.
Yeah, communicate about it.
And share our distinct experiences of the same emotion.
And what's really interesting to me is that it seems like you're celebrating nostalgia and celebrating the experience, drawing people to it. And like I said, there's this growing body of evidence that it actually has health benefits. Yet I just feel as though so often we're being browbeat. This idea is being drummed into us. Be present. Don't live in the past. So as a nostalgia researcher and what you're doing with this initiative, how can you speak to that?
Is it possible, I'm going to interject, is it possible that with any horror to transform it with nostalgia, to transform the survival of the horror into something beautiful? That's perhaps why it's healthy.
So, okay, I'm going to address Sean's point before yours, Matt. Sorry.
Never.
Are you mad at me?
So that is a really good point that you bring up, because nostalgia has been highly correlated, especially waves of nostalgia have been highly correlated with times of global displacement. So the way nostalgia was founded or started, it was actually thought of to be a disease. In 1688, I know, there was a doctor in Switzerland, his name is Johannes Hofer.
Switzerland.
And he was looking at all these Swiss soldiers who were displaced from their home, and he was like, why are they all obsessed with going home? What is their singular obsession about going home? And so he came up with this word and he called it nostalgia, which is a Greek word, but not from Greece at all.
I didn't know that.
And so it started as a disease. And the way they used to treat it was with opium, with leeches.
Yeah, with addiction.
But the best medication, they said, was to go back home. They were literally return home. And of course, now for us, it's no longer a disease. But the big thing that is still common is that displacement thing we keep coming back to. After COVID, there was a surge in nostalgia because, people were times before COVID were so much better, or things were less volatile, or, to cite a really bad example, but also really accurate example is anytime a big group of people gets displaced from their home. So the India-Pakistan partition, the crisis going on in the Middle East right now, that such large-scale displacements can really create this collective experience of my homeland and what is happening to my homeland. And that are times when nostalgia is super powerful because it helps you maintain that connection to your past.
And because genetic code, we have memory attached to our
there is methylation.
DNA, so we all
What's that
get
word?
triggered.
Methylation?
But yes, so actually,
I know that guy.
so DNA methylation is when there are changes to your genetic code because of your experience with the environment. And it's been studied in rats and stuff. And there's also demethylation, which is when those changes go away with time and so on. But that was just an offshoot of the genetic code thing she was saying. But the one thing I did want to stress is something that I think everyone should know is that as a scientist, personally, I am not really convinced by the evidence that everyone should nostalgize. Yes, nostalgia like really helps with social connection. It really helps with like maintaining your identity when things have changed for you. But the actual benefits of it on your well-being are very conditional on like how nostalgic you are as a person in everyday life. And those who are more nostalgic, the benefits are stronger for them. But that's the same thing as like, you know, those who exercise more, the benefits are better for them. You know?
That makes sense.
So that's that small caveat. But what's important is that if you think about it, if you just existed in this moment and the past was not into play at all, you would have no identity. If you just lived moment to moment.
I see what you're saying.
And the past didn't exist, you would have no identity. And like identity really links the past and the present. And that's why nostalgia has such a strong effect on you, on your identity.
I'm curious, are there any of your research, do you know people and have some interesting information about AI?
There's nothing as far as I know on AI and nostalgia,
That
but
yeah.
nostalgia is something that's currently being studied across lots of different disciplines. And there is this really interesting thing about why do people like to play video games that are so old? And the reason why people think so, the media researchers, they say nostalgia. Or like, why do people like to have record players, even though we don't need record players anymore? Maybe because of the nostalgia. It's actually one thing that I wanted to ask you, which I'd been thinking about. Are you like nostalgic at all for how music used to be made versus how it's made now?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I did this record called Sun, S-U-N, back in whatever. It took me 4 years to get it done. I'd played every sound you hear on that thing. In doing that record, I felt so detached because it was digital, everything on that record. Well, I mean, the amp, I had some things that I did that were, you know, recorded and stuff. But inside of all this tissue and stuff, I'm bone. And in my head, there's that fatty brain. There's still the bone. And when you press the piano, the vibration goes through your bone and it circulates in your brain. Same as a guitar, the vibration of the wood in your hand and your body against your rib, that bone, the vibration, you kind of become the song in a way. And the voice kind of becomes almost a harmony of the music. But in the, what was your question?
Are you nostalgic for how music used to be made?
Yes. Whatever your question was, yes.
So are you like, so when you recreated this album, did you try to stick to the way music used to be made when you were doing it?
Absolutely.
Does nostalgia always have to be a positive thing?
Not at all.
We know that it isn't
not
always.
at all. Like it's actually so interesting that as a culture, the US is pushing towards always trying to be happy or like, you know, always trying to be positive and stuff. And somehow nostalgia is being swept with that tide where I understand that it started as a disease, but everyone is trying really hard to show that it's a good thing, that it's a positive thing. But the one thing that I've always felt is that there can't be bittersweet without bitter. And nostalgia is bittersweet. You know, it is that mourning, that loss of what has no longer with you, but also cherishing it, like putting it up on a pedestal even. Like the same woman that I was telling about, Svetlana Boyam, she said nostalgia is history without guilt.
Wow.
And you know, like it makes sense because if I think about the times that I was nostalgic for, they seemed so happy and stuff. But I know for a fact that at those times, other things were also going on in my life that sucked. But looking back on it now, because I miss it, I'm no longer with it. I look at it with these rose-colored glasses, and I'm like, "Oh,
that's
it was
a
such a great time."
too.
Exactly, it is. That's the thing. So it's both mourning and joy, and that's what makes it such a
that
fun
you survived
emotion.
it, and that you're conscious today. to reflect on it as being like a lesson, a learned lesson in that pain, in that struggle, finding that value.
Well, that's what you talk about is the meaning. This idea of meaningfulness comes up a lot in the research. Can you talk about that? Sean just alluded to that.
So meaningfulness, it goes back to what we were talking about with the identity. And like how it becomes a part of your identity, these life experiences that you've had. And the one thing that does come up in research is, people look into how nostalgia can increase your meaningfulness in life. Or, they talk about how it makes you feel like you have a purpose or you belong and so on. But again, it's one of those things that works better for people who are just generally high in nostalgia. But the interesting thing is that the one thing that it does, which I believe it's one of its underlying mechanisms, is the social connectedness. So the way it's able to boost your meaning is because, it almost reminds you that you have people you love. Like, when you're feeling down in the dumps and you're like suddenly nostalgic, you're like, okay, you know what? I've had a good life, that I've grown up a lot. Things have changed. There are people that I love. And nostalgia sometimes reminds you of that.
Could I say something only because she had mentioned America and you mentioned about being happy and you mentioned those things. I wanted to just interject that as an American also, I feel that nostalgia in this country, I think, is marketed.
Thank you. I'm so glad you brought it up, because one of the things that I convinced everyone that it's worthwhile to study nostalgia is because I used to tell them that, I don't know if you know this, but marketers use nostalgia. They use it to its extreme extent to make sure that you buy products because you are emotionally invested in them. So stuff like cereal packets have families on them because it reminds you of your childhood and like growing up with your parents and stuff. And the biggest thing that I actually start some of my talks with is that nostalgia is anyways being used to guide so many of our behaviors as consumers in a capitalistic society. Why not study it on the science side? Why not study how it works, why it works the way it does, and then we can make an informed decision about, okay, you know what? I can recognize that they're trying to get me and I'm not going to fall for
and
that.
And it's all chemicals, or it's all, horrible conditions for animals to get those goods, those leather goods or whatever it is. The McDonald's, the warm pancake sizzling with the thing and the makes you feel like you're like with grandma. Yeah.
But that's why it's interesting, because then you can sometimes start thinking, okay, if I feed my kids foods that are good for them, but also like I create such a good experience around that food.
Yeah.
Eating with family, eating together, being happy. When they grow up, they might actually want to crave it and might end up eating something that's good for them, but also that they love. But again, this is just one of the mechanisms and hypotheses that we're working with. I think this is how it works. I was going to ask you, Sean, were there like any periods in your life where you were more nostalgic than others? Because there's.
I think as a kid, when things started, in the home got a little like, my stability was kind of broken up. I used to always think, I wish I was 6. I wish I was 6. I used to think about that all the time. And that was just because I remember there was a knowing me, and then there was like an unknowing me. And I really craved for that. I used to call it the lobotomized me, because the pain of knowing was so enormous to me that it was hard to function, without feeling sorrow. So I preferred to always wish that I could go back to being 6 when I was like in a tree pretending I was a gorilla. And trees don't hang out in gorillas. We all know that. But there I was. I have a 10th grade education. I failed. There's a lot of people, I think, with the economic disparity in this country. A lot of people don't have that education, and they'll unfortunately never see the inside of a university or a professor, or never know what their gifts are, never get those grades, never have that. So it'd be cool to all this information y'all have just to share it with some basic bitches.
That was honestly the biggest reason why I wanted to do this podcast, is because I'm a very strong supporter of open science.
Is that a thing?
it is actually a growing movement now where we're trying to make sure that the way we do science, everyone can understand it. We're trying to do more communication with the general public. But my biggest thing has always been, what I study is people. If I can't tell the people that I study what it is that I'm studying, I've kind of failed.
What's the point?
As a scientist.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If I'm trying to understand who they are and how they work, of course, I do it also out of like personal curiosity. But one of my biggest goals, and that's also something that actually my lab has also taught me really well, is community outreach. That, you know, our science is not supposed to just be isolated to the lab.
Yeah.
There's like people that we can get involved, even if it doesn't directly affect them. Knowledge is a very powerful thing. Like education has lifted a lot of people that I know, including myself, out of like situations that they might not want to be in. And I want to be able to pass that on.
That's cool.
That's why it's important to talk about these things in a manner that everyone can understand, right?
That is a direct quote from, do you know the song Cult of Personality by Living Colour?
Oh, yeah, I love them.
Well, you know, the opening has that Malcolm X quote, but you pretty much just directly quoted that, Hetvi. Yeah.
That's the goal, baby.
Yeah.
Isn't there something called vicarious nostalgia?
There is, there is, which is, it's a very interesting phenomena. It's nostalgia when, you know, if your parents are telling you a tale from when your great-grandparents were alive.
My grandmother, yeah.
And you've never lived it.
But I can
you wish,
see it.
Yeah, exactly.
I
you
can-
wish
yeah.
you could be there. You
Yeah.
wish you could live it again.
Yeah.
That's vicarious nostalgia. Like it's
Okay.
feeling nostalgia for like an experience you haven't lived. And
Wow.
it's, you know, it's almost
Like
like
Cleopatra did not kill herself. I believe I'm trying to
I don't
shift.
know if that's nostalgia, but
Or the truth that needs to be uncovered. And I'm sure it's written down in some fact book that
Well,
they
we're
buried.
going to find it. We're going to have you back on with an archaeologist and
oh, that'd be
Egyptologist.
so fun.
Shakti, Shakti.
We're going to get you in some
Let's go.
khakis and a safari hat and a pickaxe. You're going to find that shit.
Nah.
Well, listen, I can't thank you both enough for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Matt. We had such a good time.
Oh, God. Headphone, headphone.
Bye, y'all. Be sure to check out Sean's latest album, Cat Power Sings Dylan, out now on Domino Records. And you can catch her performing it in its entirety live on tour this winter. The tour kicks off at Carnegie Hall in New York on Valentine's Day and wraps up at London's Palladium on May 1st. For tickets and more information, please visit catpowermusic.com. To keep up to date with Hetvi, you can visit her website hetvidoshi.com. And to learn more about the Community Nostalgia Initiative, please visit thecommunitynostalgiaproject.com, beginning February 2024. Sing for Science is co-produced by Talkhouse and made possible in part by a grant from the Simons Foundation. Our music is by Panoram. Social media manager is Bailey Constas. Location engineer Chris Villapeg. And digital producer is Keenan Cush. Special thanks to Isaac Brock, Shimon Edelman, Ken Weinstein, Harper Beatty, and Jake Owen for helping make today's episode possible. If you like the show, the best way you can support us is to give us a review, tell a friend about Sing for Science, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. For more information, go to singforscience.org and follow us on social media at Sing for Science. Thanks for listening.